sound a little bit like this, which sounds very ugly. So I try to counter that by Hi, this is Danai, and today we will be talking about Ravel's Piano Concerto in G major, and specifically about the second movement. The second movement of the Piano Concerto is probably one of the all-time favorite piano pieces that exist. It's a very famous movement that people love to play and to listen to. And I've actually gotten several comments on this channel whether I could do a tutorial on that movement. And since I will be performing it in a couple of days, I thought that this is the perfect timing to make that video and film me playing it and telling you how I practice it, what I watch out for, what I think about when playing that movement, and what I find musically important. I will be linking the score of the piece in the description box down below because I will be getting quite into detail. I will be talking about the different sections, the long phrases of the beginning, the a little more technical bit of the second movement in the end, the trills. So there will be different aspects to this video, and since I will be going quite into detail, I think it might be helpful to look at the score while I am talking about these points. So if you don't have the score lying around at home already, then click on that link and you can easily follow while reading the notes there. So if you're interested in that, then keep on watching. So let's start at the very beginning of the movement. I find what defines the first 2 pages, the long piano solo until the orchestra comes in, is that it has very long phrases. What we really have to manage is for those long phrases to make sense, for the tension never to leave, and that is what makes it a little bit difficult. So the first tip that I want to mention is that you have to always have the end of the phrase in mind. So when you start, know exactly where you want to go with that phrase. Don't just kind of start out of the blue, not knowing where it's going to go or kind of seeing on the way, because then you won't have the necessary tension that you need in order to get to the end in a convincing way. So for the very beginning, let's look at the first phrase. So as you can see, it's very difficult to even define an ending for the phrase, because really, even if there are little endings, it kind of goes on. So I would say that the first note that the phrase goes towards is this note right here, this B, which is not even a note that is being played because it is obviously held over from the bar before. And then after that, it kind of continues all through here. There is not really an ending, and also this is not a real ending. It goes on until maybe here, and then it continues. This could obviously be some kind of end, but the true end is this G sharp right there. So as you can see, it is very hard to even say what the end is, and what you need are just these little stops where you know, okay, I'm going to play towards that note. And these are the notes that I mentioned before. When you have a note that is held from the bar before as a note you want to play towards, Obviously, it is more of a mental thing and it's something that happens in your imagination, but that can be very helpful and actually sound very convincing. And it means that you have to play towards the note in the bar before and then feel that first beat as the point that the phrase moves towards. You could also help yourself with the bass of the left hand, like I just did. But it still goes on. And this is the point where you can take a little breath, but also not too long, because we still haven't really arrived at an end. Now we've arrived. And now we're really entering a whole different world that sounds very magical and kind of out of this world with this next bar. So generally, always think towards the end, anticipate what is going to come, and never let the tension die down. Try to always keep it up, even if it is very slow, even if the phrases are very long. It is important to keep the listener's attention and have the listener right there with you. Another general tip on how to form those very long phrases is to really listen. And obviously we all listen when we play, but try to really detach yourself from what you're playing and imagine that you are a listener sitting in the hall, and listen to how the sound develops of that note that you're playing. Listen to exactly where it is left off at the end of the note, and then pick it up right there in the next note. So there is a danger, for example, for you to sound like this. I'm giving impulses on every note that I'm playing, which is fine. It doesn't sound super ugly, but it also doesn't exactly sound musical. And now I will try to listen to exactly where the sound is left off in the previous note and try to pick it up with the coming note. My next tip is to play a piece like that as if you had already been playing for a long time. And what I mean by that is it really takes a lot of effort and incredible amount of focus and concentration to get into the piece immediately. So try to imagine that you've already been playing this for the past 10 minutes and you are kind of diving into it in the middle of it. And I think this is also the atmosphere that you want to achieve for the listener, that you've already been at this for a while, you're in this dreamy kind of surreal atmosphere, and it's not something that you're getting into in the first bars. So before I start this movement, I really dive into the atmosphere. I try to imagine myself playing it already, and I start with this feeling of already being inside of it. Now, as we're continuing within the movement, I think it is very important to differentiate the sound between the right and the left hand. It's very important to create different colors, different amounts of sound projection. The right hand, especially in this opening passage and also later on before it has all the fast notes, has a very leading role. It's playing the melody, it's playing a very singing line, and the left hand has a very accompanying role. So it's important that the right hand really projects a lot and you really feel like it is in the foreground. I always try to imagine that it is a singer in the room with me, and the left hand is kind of a warm sound coming from the room next to me. So literally from a different room, and this helps me to create the right sound. Now, keep in mind, you don't want the left hand to sound too slimmed down or like it doesn't really have any bass. Of course, especially the bass has to have a nice warm tone to it, but it is not supposed to, and it doesn't need to have the same amount of projection that the right hand does. The moments where the bass can really shine and you can let the left hand shine through is when you are playing a note in the right hand that is held over from the previous bar. So for example, here, this bass can really have a strong sound. And then the left hand goes back in volume again. A little bit about the trills. There are two very long trills in that second movement, one at the very end, which is several bars long, and one after that opening solo of the piano, let's say. And both those trills are not supposed to be loud. They're supposed to sound very subtle, kind of like a little ornament, very even also, and kind of dreamy, a little bit surreal. And the way that I try to achieve this atmosphere is by obviously putting pedal under the trill, and also by not trilling too quickly. I'm trying to create a trill that is not super loud, so I have to really trill at a little lower volume. And also I just choose a slightly slower speed than the usual virtuoso trill I would play. Usually I think I would have a speed like this. And then here I choose a slightly slower speed to create this special atmosphere that is required. These trills are not supposed to sound so virtuoso. I think that it is more important that they are even, and not even necessarily rhythmically, but especially even in sound. You don't want one note sticking out suddenly. So really try to get on that very low volume, a very piano trill, and then just trill a little bit slower. Interestingly enough, usually my favorite fingering for a trill is 1-3, because I find like this is how I can get it the fastest. But for this situation, I always choose 2-3, because I find that it is somehow easier to get it super even. And since I'm doing it a bit slower, that also makes a difference. So I would recommend 2-3, but obviously this is very personal and everyone prefers different fingerings. So now let's get into those uncomfortable, very pianissimo runs that we find in this movement towards the end. There are all these triplets, then there are also faster notes. And what is important there is that they are all very soft, very pianissimo, and also that the fingers all have the same weight. You don't want anything like this happening. You want them to sound very, very even. Now, to achieve this evenness, first of all, I practice them slowly to really distribute the weight evenly between my fingers and to know what that feels like. Then I also practice them non-legato, so I really take my time and practice them like this. And so on. And then when I have this kind of a pattern where one note keeps repeating itself, so in this case it is the A flat, I try to put a little bit of more weight on the other note, because you will always automatically, your ear will go to the A flat. It will always sound a little bit like this, which sounds very ugly. So I try to counter that by putting more weight on the other notes, and then thus creating more of an even feeling. And once you reach that whole E major section where the right hand is doing all kinds of uncomfortable things with the fast notes, but the rhythm stays the same, you really have to make sure that you get this evenness. And the way that you will get it is, I find, by practicing at different dynamics. Don't just practice them at a pianissimo, which they have to be in the end, but practice them at a mezzo piano, at a mezzo forte, even forte, to not always have to play it at this incredibly soft volume, but to really play them strongly and securely. And then when you go back to that soft volume, you will feel less awkward and much more secure in playing them. Second tip that I would suggest for this passage specifically is to find some notes that you kind of have as checkpoints, because it is so uncomfortable. If you have some very weird passages, pick one note where you stay a split second longer, but that split second gives you the chance to kind of bounce off of that note and take it comfortably from there. So these two bars, for example, are extremely strangely written, and this is why I use the third beat as a little bit of a checkpoint. This is where I put some weight. It is something that probably only you will notice and is not even going to be audible to the listener, but for you, it's going to make a huge difference. It's not even in the realm of rubato. You're not even going to get slower. It's more just really a split second that you spent longer on that note, and that is mentally going to help you so much. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and found it helpful and interesting. Let me know if you knew this piece before, or if you are working on it right now or are looking to work on it, or maybe if you have even already performed it. Let me know what your approach is, if you agree with what I said, or if you actually have different musical ideas. I will be very interested to hear your ideas and to read your comments, and I'll see you again in the next video. Bye.